I recently got the Samsung Evo 860 SSD with 1TB of storage for my computer, and besides the huge improvements in boot and loading times in general, I wanted to see if an SSD could bring big improvements for OSU as well. Next to that, I noticed that a lot of people on the subreddit were wondering whether or not to put OSU on their SSD, etc. So I decided to research the following: how fast the game boots, how fast do the maps import, what's the frame rate in gameplay, and micro stutters on choosing random maps, which is essentially just pressing F2 quickly. Before we start, I'll just disclose my computer specs. I have a GTX 970 with 4GB of GDDR5 VRAM that has a modified BIOS for better performance, an Intel i7-6700 processor at stock speeds, 16GB of DDR4 RAM with Samsung SSD, a 7200 RPM hard drive, and a 144Hz Asus monitor. Now we can look at the test results. The first thing I tested was the boot speed of the game, and here's what my setup was. I got two completely fresh installs of OSU on both my SSD and hard drive, launched them once to get the basic stuff downloaded and lower the volume, turned it off and restarted my computer. After my computer fully booted, I measured the boot times from the moment I pressed the open button until the first frame of the login menu showing up. And the results were as follows. The first boot was almost 1 second faster on an SSD compared to a hard drive, and all other times were almost exactly the same, with a few milliseconds of variations which we can ignore. I restarted my computer after testing the SSD 5 times and turned off Wallpaper Engine both times, so there are no possible errors in my testing. Next thing I tested were the map import times with the following setup. Both the SSD and hard drive installs got the same map files, which are exactly 6.36GB large with 781 maps. I would have used a larger map folder, but I recently formatted my computer and this was all I got, and 6GB of files wasn't that hard to move around. With the setup out of the way, the results were as follows. The initial import took 16.08 seconds on an SSD compared to the hard drive's 18.14 seconds, and the other rescans took significantly less. However, an SSD proved itself much faster, because the larger your map folder is, the more the speed scales, so if you have a much bigger folder, you'll see an even bigger improvement. Alright, for the frame rate in gameplay I used all default settings with the default skin, since this was a fresh install, and I played a 3-minute song with unlimited frame rate. As you can see, the results for an SSD are slightly faster, which isn't completely clear to me since an SSD technically shouldn't affect this at all. However, such small differences in frame rate, when the frame rates are in thousands, can be written off as negligible. With that, I concluded that an SSD has a next to none effect on the frame rate. I forgot to mention that the plays were done with automod, so everything was done exactly the same. And the last, most complicated thing we'll be looking at are frame times while you're browsing maps in the song select menu. For people that don't know what frame times are, they are basically a measurement of how often your GPU renders frames. The lower the frame times, the higher the amount of frames are rendered. So how does this relate to OSU then? Then we see, when you press F2, you force a random map to load, which slows your game down as it searches for the information that it needs to load. And the longer it takes for the game to find information, the slower your game runs and the stutters are more obvious. This is where an SSD comes in helpful, because the game can search the map folder much faster than with a hard drive, causing your frame times to remain lower and for the stutters from loading map information to remain almost, if not completely invisible to the human eye. So this is how my test works. The test consists of 1 minute of F2 presses every 50 milliseconds while Fraps recorded frame times in the background. What this should show us is how long does the game take to find and load the map files under constant load on the SSD or hard drive, and show us how obvious the stutters would appear to the human eye. Keep in mind that if you have a high refresh rate monitor like I do, the stutters will appear more obvious if the number goes under your monitor's refresh rate. And here are the results. Most of the time the SSD would keep frame times of 7.71 milliseconds, 1% of the time it would shoot up to 33.9, and 0.1% of the time it would go all the way up to 56.3. The hard drive would almost double these numbers in all cases besides the average, which was 8.97 milliseconds. And here are these numbers translated into FPS. As you can see, the SSD makes a difference that is, at least to me, really visible on my 144Hz monitor, but mileage may vary for you. I've also tested this by pressing the right arrow to browse the maps, but the difference was so small that I didn't feel like it needed to be included in my final results. And that's it for this video. If you find any flaws or think that something else needed to be tested, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, you can support me by liking it and subscribing. That really means a lot to me. Thank you for watching.